Okay, people joining the live stream. This is talking about incremental improvements to Wolfram Language for future versions. Okay, so first up we have a new potential function called thread inside. Do we have alternate names for that yet? Or
not really? This is more like experimenting with the function. So that's a prototype, what you just evaluated. And yeah, the first thing I wanted to mention.
Why am I getting that message? Could not process unknown packet, $failed.
No idea.
Weird. Okay, fine. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So this is a small issue that is important for when we use threading with negative number of levels. The fact that these two first inputs give the same output. So in a sense, this is not truly invertible.
So what?
So we need to decide when we thread back F1 level, which of these two do we return, which I think should be the second one, because it's the general case, as demonstrated by the third input.
Yes, I'm not sure I understand. Okay, look, I need to remind myself what's going to happen here. Okay.
So the idea will be if
I'm sorry, this is too weird. This could not process packet failed. Let me just try something here. Yeah. That's really weird. I'm trying to delete that and it isn't working. I'm going to quit this whole session and restart. Who knows what I've been doing here? It's probably got some. Oh. That was what that was. That was version 12.1. Who knows what that was doing? Okay, with software from the future. Software from the very early in the release cycle. Somebody might want to report that, or it might not be worth the trouble. Just report it that it wasn't opening sections correctly. Okay.
You should reevaluate the code section.
Okay. So do we have a description again of what this is doing? Thread inside.
Not yet.
What would be the one-line description of what this does?
It's moving heads up and down a structure.
Yes. Thread inside is not the worst name for that. Okay. It's equivalent to the explicit thread inside with one level. Okay.
Yeah.
Thread inside one level F.
That's the head we push inside.
Okay, that's the head pushed inside. That's the head left outside.
That's the head we push through.
So if I said G here, it would do nothing.
Exactly.
Okay. And that says, but now if I said something other than list, so there's only one correct answer.
Right. So here we are threading through levels of array. And so list is what we are specifying what is an array. Everything else is considered a scalar, like this X.
Yes, I understand. So for example, if we were to say thread inside list vertical bar G or something, let's try, for example, something like this. If we said this, and then that's XY, no, G of XY.
No, that's not going to work.
I mean, in theory, would it work? So what that's doing is it's pushing the head F.
No, but because those heads are going to be collected and put at the upper level, they have to be the same. So we cannot thread through several heads at the same time.
Oh, I see. So what's the point of saying this? It's just don't do it. Consider the thing to be a scalar and just don't thread at all.
Well, you would have to say thread through list or thread through G. Try to change that to G now instead of list.
I see.
And now the list is considered a scalar.
Yeah, that's interesting. This is an interesting operation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So thread has, by the way, the same argument. So the fourth argument of thread inside is the second argument of thread. But thread doesn't have the other two.
Wait a minute. The fourth argument or the, oh yeah, because that's what to thread over. So if I say thread f of g of xy, g of zw, whatever,
mm-hmm.
comma g.
Right.
Right. Doesn't it have a level spec as well?
No, it doesn't. And that's the problem with thread. It only threads once.
Okay. Okay. By once, we mean it doesn't rodentify the head. I think we used to have the notion, back in version 0.9, we had the notion of rodentification, that is burrowing like a rodent. Fortunately, that was removed. Just as well. Okay, so if in 2 here, yeah, it goes all the way down.
Exactly.
Okay. There's no notion of it going to more than one level. It just goes down and then deploys itself.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it will do the same thing as thread. So if it doesn't find enough levels of 1, it will just replicate. So exactly.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay.
And now you can do -2 of that output. But now, because you have to specify the head, you have to really say, no, you have to really say F, because otherwise it's going to try the outermost, which is list.
I see.
And you see how the X was replicated? That was the issue I was mentioning before.
Yeah, I understand. I think that's okay. But let's look at what the operation is in the case of list. Okay, so if I say thread inside and then list A, B, C, D, this is going to do a transpose operation, isn't it?
Right.
Okay, so now if I do thread inside that -1, oops, that's not what I meant. Okay, that's also a transpose in this case, but if I have a deeper tensor, so if I say thread inside of array A333, comma -2, what does that do?
I
think it's a transpose of some kind.
It is, but it's not trivial, because here it's realizing that there are 2 levels. No, only the deepest one can be moved. So
did that do nothing?
No, here it's realizing that it can move 2. There are 3 levels, and there are 2 that can be moved upwards 1. So this gets a bit tricky.
Not the same. Okay. Okay, so wait a minute. So if I said here, if I say pull it from the deepest ocean, so to speak, and I say this thing with -3,
When you specify too many, it's going to do as much as it can. You can actually say minus infinity. And it will try to go as deep as it can and move it as upwards as much as it can.
Okay.
This case is particularly tricky because by default, it's always trying to move the outermost head, which is list. And because in this case, there are several levels of list, it's going to try to move them all. So this is simpler to understand in those cases in which there is a single head to be moved.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. But this looks reasonable. Okay. So then. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this function is fine.
Yeah. I think the only thing to decide was this issue of whether to replicate common elements or not.
I think yes. I think yes. I don't have a problem with that.
Right. So yeah, these are more or less common examples. And then at the end there is an application to geoposition, which is where we started. The geoposition can take that case, which is lists of points, and sometimes we need to push the geoposition head one or twice.
Yes, and that will exhume geopositions from the deepest depths.
Exactly. And that example threads twice. So this is what we can do now with any function.
Okay. What do we think the description of thread inside would be? So wait a minute, the one argument thread inside is equivalent to thread. Is that correct?
Completely.
Okay, so just so we understand what we might be saying here. Why is that saying version 12? Why isn't that defaulting to 12.1? Sushma, I think that's something for you.
Yep.
Okay, so here what we would say is thread inside. Let's see what the thread documentation looks like. It's interesting what it does there, f of args. So in the case of thread inside, it's again an f of listed args, right?
With one argument, yes.
No, I understand, but even with two arguments, if n is positive,
mm-hmm.
Threads f over lists that appear at level n in args. Is that correct?
I would say over n levels of lists that appear.
Okay. Okay, now the next case is the negative level case. Which doesn't look like this, does it?
Well, this is useful only if there are deeper levels of f as well. So the negative is more useful when you specify the third argument, which is the level you want to move upward.
Right, so maybe what we have to do here is to give the three argument. I mean, we can make the one argument case work Actually, I think there's an argument that we should not make the one argument case work because it's kind of stupid and it's just a formula for people doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, we could use an operator form, perhaps.
Well, that's also true. Yeah, so let's not have the one argument form work.
Okay.
Okay, so here we would say threads over what is it? Threads? How do we want to say this? This is, or are we going to, with positive n? Okay, explain this to me, what this is here.
I would say threads f in the given expression n levels of list. Yes, through n levels of lists.
In expr. Wait a minute, does f occur as the outer?
Not necessarily. It has to occur at some level inside expr.
Threads any instances of f that occur in expr.
Yep.
But now, wait a minute, is it down to n levels or at n levels? What was it? What is it?
It's if n is positive, then it's threads n levels down in expr.
That occur at most n levels down in expr. Is that right?
Well, it sounds as the at most is referring to occur.
N levels down in expr, inside expr.
Perhaps we should say threads n levels down in expr any instances of f that occur in the expression.
I don't completely understand that. Okay, so you're saying threads n levels down. What does it mean that threads n levels down? I thought it was picking up only those f's that are on level n.
Yes, I just wanted to avoid the impression.
So I think we should say threads instances of f that occur at level n in expr.
But that's not what it is. It doesn't matter where f appears. It will just be pushed down n levels.
I see.
What I wanted to avoid is occur n times. Occur n.
Yeah, I understand. Threads any instances of f that occur inside expr. That's down. Well, how does it correspond to this one? Threads. Well, it's actually threads over n levels of list. Any instances of f that occur inside expression.
Yeah.
Okay, now what about the negative level case? If we document this case.
Yes, so now we have to make the distinction of threading down or threading up. I guess we have to invent the names here. Because
yeah, well, hold on. So we've also got the case, and that's expr again there, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so then we've got thread inside exper nfg. Threads over
n levels of G.
levels of G.
Okay, threads or pools through.
Okay. Well, let's get this implemented. I mean, I think it's looking good.
So this last one, when you say pools, it's both considering positive and negative n. So that verb is correct for both cases.
I think so.
Okay.
Sandra on our live stream is saying that's going to be a hard function. Yeah, it's going to be a function that one learns to use in particular cases, and one will slowly get used to it. I give this one a few years for people to get used to this one. I think that first case is going to be fairly commonly understood.
Yeah.
I think some of these other cases are really interesting and will turn out to be really useful.
I think so. I'm wondering whether, for example, with lists and associations, we can do things fast, like moving association several levels down and things like that.
I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work on associations. I see. You're saying that this might be able to take a list of associations. I don't even know how that would work. Does that work? A list of associations to an association of lists and things? I don't think that works.
So imagine associations with values being arrays, matrices, and we want to push the keys several levels down.
Yes. Okay, so this thing needs to interoperate with associations. It's not obvious how that would work to me. I mean, it's got to be generalized a bit to work with associations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, let's move on.
Mm-hmm. So this is a topic.
ILD tickets, okay.
So this was in the previous ILD agenda. So the idea is that we have tickets for these functions, but they are simple to implement. So it may go to the Wolfram repository. So I think the main point is I'm trying to understand the border between the two projects.
Yeah.
And so these are potential.
Head map. Why is it that way around?
This is what we discussed the previous time. Some sort of dual of map in which, yeah, we could reverse the order.
I think reversing the order makes sense. I think head map the other way around is a much more sensible. Let's take a look here. I don't know whether that one, I mean, maybe that one could be a system function. It's pretty obvious in what it does. And it's just particularly, if it curries. I mean,
second argument?
Well, I'm thinking, okay, so this case here, that's pretty useful.
Mm-hmm.
But now the curry of that other one would be head map of FGH of X. There's no other way to do that, is there?
Well, would be useful also to have a list of a data set whose elements are functions, and we just want to map over all of them over an element. This is one of those cases in which it could be useful to carry either argument.
I think it's more natural if we are going to put the functions first to carry it this way round.
Yes, by analogy with map, and I see that.
Okay. I don't know why I say it, but my tendency is to think this should be a system function.
Okay.
But let's take a look at some of these others, okay?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I'm saving this back somewhere. Oh my God, I'm saving it to some garbage place. Ethan on our live stream is asking about thread inside, and wouldn't one want to control the levels, heads, and spans simultaneously? I don't know. The use of the span. Yeah, that is a pain in the neck, isn't it? I mean, the question of the span in thread is basically a selector for when this F, where in the G's, is that right? Or where in the F's, which arguments of the F's to look at with respect to threading?
Right. So if we added that argument, then this would become a strict generalization of thread.
Yeah, I understand. And then the only reason this isn't thread itself is because of the argument order.
Right.
We should check that it will be possible to add a span somehow. Where would we put the span? Is it a span of F's or a span of G's?
In thread, it's a span of F.
Although one could imagine spans for both F and G.
Yes, I guess so. I have to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, we could imagine decorating with a span somehow with a rule or something like this. A little bit like how groupings, well, this isn't how groupings does it. Groupings works differently. Groupings is doing it with, arity.
Exactly.
All right, that's a question for thread inside.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, comment on our live stream. Head map is just through with the same argument structure.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, through was not a successful function. I can never remember how through works. Oh God, yes, this thing is crazy. Through is to heads as thread is to inner lists, somehow.
Yes, so thread and map thread have a similar relation. The fact that thread takes the expression already constructed and map thread has the function outside.
Yeah, Sandra on our live stream is writing a almost zero liner for head map. The pointing out that it's just this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, through was a mistake.
I think it's rare that we find lists as heads. And that's why it's not so much used.
Right. I mean, the thought of through was that it will be used for operators.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, the idea was, but this was a version 1 function. right? The idea was that operate. What the heck does this do? Yeah, right. This is like an operator applying itself to the head. So, for example, derivative could be an operate. Derivative, like just as derivative is, you get what I'm saying?
Yes, and an alternative name for operate could have been map at head.
Yeah.
This is what it's doing. It's mapping at position 0.
Right. I mean, look, the basic point was the bet made 31 years ago. By the way, we have a bunch of, somebody needs to mute themselves, I think. The bet made, thank you, Danny. The bet made was that one would use composite heads as operators in some mathematical type sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that didn't happen. People have not found that convenient, I believe. All right, our live stream folk are encouraging head map.
One reason is that it could perhaps be the function that through and operate never quite became. It might just, it's a one-liner, but it might hit the right need.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think it's correct. And I think particularly in the curried form, it's pretty nice. And I think its name is understandable.
That's a big distinction between that and through.
Yeah, well, the point is, look, through was a bet. I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting case because it's a design idea that as of still, 30 years later, it hasn't worked out. I'm not convinced that it's never going to work out. If headdresses became more popular, it might actually work out. Headdresses being things like essentially adverbs controlling functions that wrap the head in some way, like inactive wraps the head. I bet that inactive and through could play fairly nicely together, but I just don't think people think, it's hard enough for people to think in terms of functions, let alone these kinds of head decorators.
That's a good example. Operating active should be an example.
It should be an example, yes, it should be an example. As should operate with derivative. Right? I mean, operate of derivative should just work.
Derivative one.
Derivative. Come on. Well, let's say 2 or something.
Yep.
Comma f of x. Does that.
Mm-hmm.
See, isn't that magnificent?
Yep.
I mean, that was the original idea of operate, was to do things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that example really, really, really should be there.
Okay.
Yeah, inverse function. It's another good one.
Yes. I mean, yeah, I mean, honestly, these are not totally stupid by any means. I mean, otherwise, there's no easy way to do this. I mean, it's not even a bad name, operate.
Well, it's difficult to predict what it's going to do. That's why map at head, I think, would have been clearer, but longer.
Okay, 2 questions here. So, comment from Sander that head map does sound a bit like it maps onto the head, as opposed to map head. No, because map head is more like map at head, as in map. I mean,
That's operate precisely. You can do map at position 0.
Right. So there's a thing from Stack Exchange here. Let me see. List of triples. Okay, a list of triples. Best way to apply F to the first element of each triple. Oh, I see. So it's a deeper level version of head map.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it could take an argument. With this argument ordering, it would happily take a third argument that is a level spec. But actually, that's not clear how it composes, because it's more like an inner to go across. You get what I'm saying? I mean, in other words, all right, that requires a bit more thought. Okay, let us ponder that question, and maybe you can get back to that another time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're good for. I think the 2 argument form is looking promising, and the 1 and 2 argument forms are looking promising. Okay, let's look at all cases.
So this was the 0 infinity version instead of 1 level spec.
Yeah, okay, hold on. Yeah, actually several comments on a live stream. Map head looks too much like map thread. Somebody says, I think that's a map head. I'm not convinced about that one. Looks like head apply, says somebody else, says and Genesis. Why is it head? Oh, I see what you're saying. No. Yes. No. It isn't an apply because it's not slicing off a layer. It is a map, not an apply, right?
Yes.
List through. No, I guarantee nobody will ever understand that. List map. Too generic sounding. Yeah, I know that Sandra is commenting in the post. In that post, it's asking for the different functions to be applied in a threaded way to the successive levels.
I think the solution to that problem really requires the use of map thread, combined possibly with this head map.
That's possible. I see. So a curried form of head map together with map thread somehow.
Right.
Boy, one day we're actually going to give people some real things to teach in functional programming classes. By the time people have learnt, their way around all of these different head gymnastics and so on, it's quite interesting, really. Okay, all cases.
Yes, so this appeared because we have first case, which is a particular case of cases. We discussed the possibility of having all cases.
Well, first case is a single level, the first case that occurs in that the first case that occurs in that list. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this one looks like a fine function repository function for the time being.
Mm-hmm.
It's a utility, but I don't really see it as being core.
Okay.
That seems like a find function repository function. Why is it not the same as, oh, I see, any true and all true are a different thing here?
Yes, because those worry about individual elements one by one.
Yeah, so this is the same test, not even a same test. It's a yeah, I understand what this is. Find function repository function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here they can be all true or all false.
Right.
So,
or, I mean, it's an equivalence. It's are they all a member of the same equivalence class under some transformation?
right.
Okay, trim.
Yes. So the idea here is that we have several X trim functions, but we don't have a general trim for arrays. But this can be done with padding, because padding takes negative specs.
So there is trim right and trim left in function repository.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I see.
Okay.
So perhaps it's this coming from path left, path right.
Okay, let me look at those. We are going to have to invent a guide page mechanism for this.
Group functions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that what you had in mind for trim?
Yes, very close to it. Yeah. So yeah, it makes sense to have two separate functions, like we do for padding.
Well, except if it's two-dimensional. What does this do if it is trimming? I mean, image trims on all sides, right?
Yes.
And also, image trim is a content-related trim, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Doesn't image trim depend on? What the heck is that? I thought image trim had one. Oh gosh, that's image crop. I see. So image trim, but this doesn't tell you. So this should have another form, which is a two-argument form that says how much to trim. Trim left should be able to give you a specific trim size.
Yes. Can we have a look at path left to compare? I was assuming this would be very similar to the padding functions.
Yeah, I think so. Makes a list of length n. So trim left would make a list of length n. I mean, in pad left of one argument, pads a ragged array. Yeah, I think this is I think this is probably going to make it as a system function, but we might as well implement it in the function repository for the time being.
If it follows path left, it's going to be nearly identical to path left, perhaps just changing the signs of n, because, sorry.
I don't think, yeah, I agree. It's going to be very similar.
Yeah. So not the sign, but the fact that n can be shorter than the length, and then it trims.
Yeah, but also it doesn't have a padding argument and all kinds of other stuff. Right. I mean, well, if n is longer than the length, it might need a padding argument.
Right.
But I'd prefer for it to just error out, I think, in that case. Okay, so I think for the time being, trim left, trim right should go in the function repository.
Mm-hmm.
Association flatten.
Yeah, here it's better to look at the examples. So the idea is that for nested associations, the idea was to flatten them to a single association with lists of keys.
That should be in the function repository. I have no idea if that operation is going to be useful.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, nested lookup.
So this is a version of lookup, which is also able to look inside nested associations.
I think it should be in the function repository. I don't know how useful it's going to be. Histogram association. Oh, yeah. Really, that's a thing where the big idea here is intervals.
Yes. To me, this is an alternative notation for histogram list.
Yes, I agree, but histogram list doesn't have the left-hand sides, right?
Yes.
Histogram lists is just purely the values of the bin values, isn't it?
No, the first list is the borders between
Let me see what it does. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird. Well, it's a good function repository function, because again, I don't know if it's exactly right. Egyptian fraction, compatibility with the past.
So I took the code from a summer school project.
Okay. Well, it looks quite elaborate, actually, and perhaps even efficient. Okay. What on earth does this do? So
I think it's taking numerator, denominator, and then two numerators. So the 1 are the first numerators of the first two fractions. So you have to find the denominators and a remainder.
people are pointing out that nested lookup already exists in the function repository. So that's a null operation.
Okay.
And Ethan is pointing out that we need to not add too many typed weird corner cases. And I agree with that, which is why these things are getting put in the function repository. Because I think ultimately we may understand how to do these things in a more general way. All right, I thought Egyptian fractions were by default one numerator things. Am I wrong about that?
I don't really know.
I recall talking to Todd Rowland a long time ago, and he mentioned that this is not exactly Egyptian fraction, but like a case of it.
Well, that's not good enough. I mean, and you know, the Egyptians were around for a long time. Okay, so what does Wolfram Alpha use? Do we know?
No.
I don't know, but it's exactly the same.
Sandra is saying Egyptian fraction also exists.
What?
Okay, well, then this is going to be easy then.
Wait a minute. No, I even went to the wrong repository. That's amusing. When is this one going to be done, by the way? Oh my gosh. Where does the method get given? I don't understand where the method is given here.
You mean definition?
No, I mean
okay, method, yeah, option.
It should just say has the option method, because otherwise it's not clear what this is.
Yeah.
And I
okay.
would strongly recommend that that's a table.
Okay.
Well, this is magnificent. Right. So much for that. Okay. That was easy. Okay.
Okay, and then the last topic is just, I think we should restart the discussion of column operations.
So do I. Let me just ask a question about, let me just look at the ILD summary pages again, because I wanted to know, Sushma, how much of this have we now gone through? The so-called low-hanging stuff.
We have gone through. I mean, I need to check my notes, but we did go through a lot of them, and added them as a potential function repository. The ones which you put like stars were like potential function repository. But
well, I think dtrend should be considered as a system function, because I think it's very useful. And I think that will be a question for Roger and the statistics team.
Okay.
Okay. Notebook history functions, did those get added to the repository?
No, I've not seen them yet. So I will ping.
Because that should be very easy, but it's kind of useful. I mean, that's basically getting a computable form of this incredibly old-fashioned. I mean, this is cool because, it's showing. We just need to get, I mean, by the way, somebody should do, this is a good like UI, UX intern project to just clean up the appearance of this thing. I mean, it's really close to being very good, but I think it'd be much more useful to have a programmatic way to get this stuff out. And it requires, why is it pinking? Why did that pink? Okay, another question is, this view here is not a completely uninteresting view for timeline plots. And we should investigate some kind of dynamic timeline plot.
Okay.
Capable of having that kind of, why is it pinking? Why is that pinking? Did you see it pink?
I did see it, yes.
Yep.
Are you clicking? You did click, right?
I'm not clicking. I'm simply hovering. Yeah, you know what's happening? Oh, yes. It's on some kind of transition over that bottom line. Causes it to pink. Okay, so look, dtrend, I think, should be something considered for system stuff, for ILD. Okay, although I think it should actually be implemented by the statistics team. Notebook history can be in the function repository. What happened to next moon?
I think I have a ticket for that in function repository.
Should it be function repository or should it be built in? It's pretty, by the time we have moon phase, it seems to me that next moon is a relevant thing. Okay, I mean, just like we have, the next day type stuff. What is it called anyway? Day.
Next date.
Next date. So if I say next date, why isn't that auto-completing? Can we note that down? That's
yep.
No auto-completion. But anyway, next date. And I think we should have next moon. I mean, we're stuck on this planet. We got one moon. There's really not, it's a thing that's, I don't think we need to worry about. We'll worry about the Martian case later.
Do we want it looks like in that one we have an optional third argument that's direction. Do we want that? Or I'm assuming previous moon and current moon are probably less relevant.
Current moon, look.
Yeah, I know moon phase would give us.
moon phase will give us the current phase. Yes. Oh yeah, Sandra is pointing out that it's similar to sunrise. But I think it has to be next moon, because even next moon with 0 arguments, it's not obvious what that means, because you might want full or new or whatever. And in my basic astronomy, right, the unlike sunrise, which has a location dependence,
We also have solar eclipse, which is also a next something function.
yeah, well, unfortunately, the dynamics of yes. Does solar eclipse, so sunrise obviously takes a location spec, but the moon phase does not require a location spec, nor does next moon require a location spec. Right? Am I being confused in any way? I mean, the only way it could require it is the time zone. That's the only reason. I mean, the moon may not be visible, but the moon will still be whatever the moon is in terms of.
I guess it depends how precise we want to be. The fact that you are in a different position of the moon will introduce a little bit of difference in angles.
From what?
I mean, when
okay, Wikipedia apparently, according to Sanders, says in astronomy, the new moon is the first lunar phase when the moon and sun have the same ecliptic longitude. That's fine, but that's the ecliptic longitude does not depend on where you are on the Earth, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
How do we request the next? I see, next total. So if I say solar eclipse total here, that's really weird. I don't understand this. I don't understand this now. That's really weird.
Seems to be an option, eclipse type. Try eclipse types. Eclipse type goes to total.
Okay, so now I see. Okay, so if I say total phase polygon, yeah, I mean, the problem is that these things require slightly different, and I now say either geolist plot or geographics of that. Magnificent. Okay, that's magnificent. Okay, look, I think that next moon is simply a missing function, given that we have things like sunrise and solar eclipse. You know, next moon is a lot less obscure than solar eclipse.
Would it make sense to make next date to take specifications of things?
I was thinking about that. I was wondering about that. I think it's a little bit weird.
Yeah, right now, next, previous, and current either take a granularity or a day type specification. I think thinking about phases of a lunar cycle is a little bit of a stretch.
I agree. I don't think anybody would ever think of it. So, next date, doesn't it have an N in it where you can have 3 from now?
That's date plus.
I see.
I suppose we could have it, but then it really is just a different version of date plus. And we already have
Right.
date plus, which is already kind of a confusing difference.
Right. But so, yeah. As Sander points out, next moon should certainly be able to take a phase argument. So next moon should be able to take, like I have here, 0.7.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. So in the two argument form of next date, it starts with the date and then has the granularity. But I don't think we have to do so for next moon. Do we really need a previous moon? I mean, we don't have for solar eclipse. See, what is the generic? Solar eclipse is asking about properties of a solar eclipse. Moon phase, I don't think we can shoehorn this into moon phase. That's the wrong thing to do, because what we want is...
So solar eclipse takes a time direction. So it can be -1 and then you count backwards. So it gives you the last.
Fine. I think next moon should just be, we should just have next moon and we should not have previous moon. I think previous moon is unnecessary and pedantic. Unless there's a more generic way to say next, which I don't see.
Something about solar eclipse that was always a bit unfortunate is that you ask for a solar eclipse, you get one, and then you ask for solar eclipse of that date, and you get the next one, not that one.
That's
so it's
stupid. That's stupid. Why did we do that? I mean,
because it says next. So this idea of next has this instant.
Well, this is a temporal logic issue again.
Yes.
And I mean, I think that we should take the point of view that next. Okay, the problem is with a granularity. Okay, with an instantaneous granularity in the continuum, I could argue that next is that instant. With a granularity of a day, next day is clearly the next day. But I could argue that the degenerate form of next is epsilon in the future, with epsilon goes to 0. And if it's an instant, then it's the same instant. Right? So the width of an instant, nextiness is by virtue of the width of the thing that you are, nexting, so to speak. If the granularity is a day, then it's the next day. If it's the next instant, that's actually the same instant, because an instant has 0 width.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think it's not how this function works.
Well, but it probably should be how it works.
Yeah.
And I just don't think, I think that's a silly definition, and I think it's wrong. And I don't think, is there not a way to get, I mean, we should have a way to get multiple solar eclipses, a list of solar eclipses, and if there isn't a way, we should make that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but stability, I think is important. We should have some sort of minimum. I mean, there are not going to be solar eclipses very close to each other, so we can resolve them.
No, I agree. This, it seems like Jeff should take a look at this and also take a time direction. Seems kind of random. This looks like a kind of a cruddy function, if I might say so.
I think this was imitating what limit does. It takes this sort of direction.
Oh, wow. Well, if we're going to do that, arguably, what's another thing like next moon? I mean, it will be the if astrology was still a booming business, we would need all kinds of functions for, next conjunction of Mercury and this and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really what this is next syzygy or something. Is that right?
Yes, in astronomy, there will be lots of particular moments to compute. And hopefully in the future, we will have a function which is general in that sense.
Yeah, I guess the other analogy I think of is, in terms of temperature, there's max temperature where you want to know what the maximum temperature on a given day is, but a property of that would be the time at which that happens, which we don't really have a function that is.
Well, we have one in the function repository because I put one there.
Yeah.
It's called max position, which
Okay.
arguably we should have as a system function. Look, I think what we'll need in astronomy is basically given a condition. Actually, kind of an interesting case because astronomy is predictable. Given a condition, when will that next be achieved? Right. So, for example, we might have a condition that says, these two planets are lined up.
Right.
I don't know how we're going to represent that. Well, I guess we're going to say some property of Mercury equals some property of Venus, and we're going to say basically it's the analog of find root or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, this is basically not wishing to sound too. This is basically find syzygies. Is that right? Find syzygies. Sandra on live stream is pointing out that by this we should also have next birthday of entity or person. How would we do that? What we would do there is we would say next date.
Yeah, that's sort of our recurring date notion of setting up some criteria for a date.
So let's say that we say next date of year and the base. Oh no, we start from the base.
So
that's not useful.
Yeah, it's giving you the granularity. So I think what you want there is date plus. You want
what I want date plus is the next. That's not going to work. That's very unuseful. So what is next birthday in terms of dates? It's the next time. It has two granularities involved in it, right?
Mm-hmm. It's something similar to it isn't the same thing, but we have futurized docs for a function called date select, where you give a criteria. So it's not in the proper system yet, but it's.
Wouldn't this be just adding plus quantity 1 year?
Well, no, it's basically saying take
the current date. It's granularizing. It's a weird operation. I mean, it is useful. It's next. Look, what it really is next anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Birth date. That's right. Birth date plus ceiling of now minus birth date. That's right.
But if we do today plus quantity 1 year, it gives the right answer, right?
Well, the question in this case is when is the next birthday for Stephen? So it's not just today plus 1 year.
No, but what I mean is that if we have already. Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I see. Now I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So next anniversary, or a more generalized form of that is, next instance of this date criteria I have.
Yeah, well, next date instance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't even know what that. I mean, I mean, that is useful. It's like, if this program started, if this is an annual event, right?
So yeah, I mean, this sort of ties in with the calculus of dates problem that we looked at a bit in date select, because you can set up a set of criteria that won't ever be true, and you have to have some sort of
but next date instance would always be true, because next date instance would be, it would have a base, it would have an increment, and the default would be from when, right? And the default for that would be now. So in the case of, I think that's a sensible thing, because that would be, right? So what that would look like is, in the case of a birthday, it would say next date instance of whatever it is, birth date, this thing here, right? Increment 1 year, and then from when it would default to now. Oh, but that's not saying the granularity. But it is that, I see, it picks up the granularity of the base.
Yeah. And so I guess we can infer from the increment what the factor we're modding out is, because you give a specific instance of a date on a given year, and we know since the increment is years that we basically need to look at switching out the year spot.
Right. So a couple of points on the live stream. So another one is next leap second, and so next leap year, which we do not have right now.
Right. Because that we need a time system for.
What do you mean we need a time system? What?
I mean, there are different there are leap seconds.
No, forget leap seconds. Leap seconds is the whole UTM, all that kind of thing, which we're eventually going to have.
Right.
Which we needed for the eclipse.
Yeah, next leap year makes sense.
But I mean, next date instance, what would we do here? So we would say, this would be kind of an abuse to say leap year here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this starts to get into calendars, which is complicated because then we want to extend it to holidays, and holidays suddenly have more complicated criteria of the second Tuesday of this month, which then we need some way of specifying. If I just give a start date and we say it happens every year, it's just going to mod out the year value. But if I say I want the next instance of Easter, it needs to know that we're working on a specific calendar, etc.
Sandra just wrote a nice piece of code for next birthday. Why didn't she submit it to the function repository? It would be useful there. Now, does that deal with the people born on the 29th of February? When do people born on the 29th of February celebrate their birthday? Does anybody know anybody born on the 29th of February?
I think it's March 1st.
Yeah.
And what do they do?
They go absolutely wild.
No. I'm asking Sushma because she said she actually knew somebody born on February 29th.
I mean, I have a friend who is born on February 29th, and we celebrate his birthday on March 1st. But it's more auspicious when there is actually a February 29th, I guess.
Okay, fine.
It's complicated when you're dealing with animals. How do you convert dog years?
I know there are some stores that have a return policy, a 1-year return policy, and if you buy something on February 29th, you actually get a 4-year return policy. It started out as a bug, but they actually just are like, sure, why not?
That's funny. It's the February 29th sale. Okay. So that's an absolutely screwy case, right, for any calendar system.
Yeah, and on other calendar systems that have leap months, things get complicated too.
Who has a leap month?
The Islamic and Jewish calendars have leap months.
How often do they have them?
Mayan also, I think.
There are a bunch of different Mayan calendars, but I think it's every 6 years. There's a 13th month.
I think they insert 7 years every 19 or 18 in the Jewish calendar. So it's like every 3 or so.
All right, we need a discussion. It sounds to me like we need a dates discussion anyway. Do we? I mean, Nick, are you steaming ahead? We should wrap this meeting, but are you steaming ahead with your date stuff or not?
Yeah, we're working on a couple of things. Jose and I were actually talking this morning about needing to set up a meeting to talk about date interval with you and a couple other projects. So we'll have that coming soonish.
And whatever has happened to temporal logic?
Well, so Jan is kind of busy now with his studies, but we still continue with that. Now, what we discovered in our last meeting is that we need to extend it more. We were kind of looking into a too small project from your point of view. So we need to make it a bit more.
All right. Although at some point we also need to merge that with the whole spatial logic stuff, because that's going to be another, and that then relates to the whole region business and topology and all this kind of thing. Right, being able to say inside, outside. I think.
Yes, there is the Allen algebra for relations with intervals, and I think this is what's needed here.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we should wrap up for right now. I think we have actually another live stream meeting in just an hour. Okay. Good stuff. Thank you, everybody here. Thank you, folks on the live stream. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.